The box was on the gravel shoulder, already half collapsed from the rain. It wasn't moving much. Just a faint shift at one corner, the way something moves when it has almost nothing left. I was driving with both hands tight on the wheel, rainwater sluicing off the windshield, the heat broken, and I almost passed it. I almost kept going. I'm glad I didn't. Because when I crouched down and pulled open the wet cardboard flap, here's what I saw. A fox kit, soaked to the skin, flame-red fur gone dark and flat, curled tight into herself like she was trying to disappear. A pale, flat-faced Pallas cat with enormous ears, lying absolutely still on its side, eyes barely slitted open. And a gorilla infant. 6 weeks old, maybe. Black fur still soft as moss. A small pale patch behind his left ear. His arms were wrapped around the fox kit. His chin was resting on top of her head. Her fur was soaked. His was dry. He had been holding her since before the rain got heavy, keeping her alive with nothing but his own body warmth. He had never stopped. He didn't even look up at me when I opened the flap. He just stayed where he was, holding on. None of them were crying. That was the thing that hit me hardest. Crying means something still has enough fight left to be afraid. These three were past that. I stood there in 33-degree rain and understood that I had just stopped for something I was not going to be able to walk away from. I didn't know yet how much I needed that. I didn't know that years later they would be the reason I survived the worst night of my life, but at that moment, all I could see was three animals that weren't supposed to survive the rain. Let me back up, because the box isn't where this story really begins. 3 weeks before that morning, I had sat in a blue plastic chair in an oncology office and been told I had breast cancer. Stage 2. Treatable. That was the word the doctor used, said with a careful kind of firmness, the way you say something true to someone you aren't sure is ready to hear it. Treatable. As if a word like that can hold the floor from dropping out from under you. It couldn't. I drove home from that appointment and sat in my driveway for 40 minutes before I could go inside. My husband was still there then. He'd been distant for months. I could feel it the way you feel a draft before you find the open window. And I told myself the distance was stress, that it was temporary, that people pull away when they're scared. I told myself that right up until the morning he sat across from me at the kitchen table and told me he was leaving. He'd met someone at the gym. 23 years old. He was sorry. He hoped I'd be okay. He took the dog. He took the good car. He took a furniture truck's worth of things I didn't even notice were gone until the rooms felt hollow. And then the house went quiet. I mean that in the way that only people who have lived alone after not being alone understand. A silence that isn't peaceful. A silence that has a sound. I started sleeping with the television on. I graded papers at midnight because it was something to do with my hands. I told almost no one about the diagnosis. One friend 2 states away, whose worry I could keep on the phone and hang up when I needed to. At school, when people asked why I looked tired, I said I had a lot of papers to grade. The morning I found the box, I was driving slowly. Not because of the rain, but because I was not ready to face my husband's sister, who worked in the teacher's lounge, and I hadn't figured out yet what expression to wear when she looked up at me. I almost didn't stop. I almost kept going. I called 4 wildlife rehabilitation centers from the side of the road with the box tucked under one arm, my other hand going numb around the phone. Full, not equipped for a great ape infant. No answer. Flooding situation. Call back tomorrow. Tomorrow. I looked down at the 3 of them dissolving in that cardboard box, and I drove home. I don't remember deciding to. I just remember my driveway. I lined my laundry basket with my winter coat and put them in it. I made 4 more calls. Same answers. Different words. I stayed on the kitchen floor next to that basket until the gorilla infant. I'd started calling him G. because he needed a name, and that was the first thing that came. Found my wrist with both hands, and pressed his face against my pulse point, and went to sleep. I didn't make a fifth call. I should tell you who they were, because before I tell you what they did for me, you need to understand who they were. G was the one I had the hardest time reading at first. He never cried. He accepted everything I gave him. Warmth, formula at the exact right temperature. The nights I spent reading out loud on the floor because the sound seemed to settle him. But he never reached for me first. Not once. In 3 years, that never changed. He watched everything. If my voice went strange, if I was moving too fast, if something in the way I was holding myself was off, he would plant himself in the center of the room and simply not move until I steadied. It wasn't aggressive. It was just a fact. Like gravity. Like something weight-bearing. By week 4, he had learned to open the refrigerator. By month 3, the door handles. He never used either for anything dramatic. He would open a door, study whatever was on the other side, and close it. He was building a map. Always building a map. Patient and methodical, and quietly sure of himself, in a way I envied more than I could say that year. Most mornings, I would come downstairs and find him already at the kitchen counter, chin resting on the edge, watching the yard through the window while I heated his formula. He would turn and watch me shake the bottle to check the temperature, track the whole small ritual with those steady dark eyes, and then take it from me with both hands the way he always did. Carefully, like he understood it had been made for him. I used to talk to him while I prepared it. I don't know why. It helped. Rue was the opposite of patient in every possible way. She was loud from her first conscious hour, this high, insistent bark yip that meant pay attention to me right now, which she deployed at maximum volume for food, for play, for perceived injustices, and sometimes, as far as I could tell, for the sheer pleasure of noise. She stole my hair tie on day 4 and hid it in her pile under the couch. When I moved the couch to clean, she screamed at me for 20 solid minutes, reorganized everything under there herself, and didn't come out for an hour. I learned not to touch that corner. She had a system for waking me up that involved running the full length of my body from feet to head and then parking herself directly on my face. She hid things constantly, socks, pens, a small decorative rock I never found, and then forgot where she'd hidden them, which caused her immense personal distress. Bath time was a full negotiation. I would fill the small basin, set out the towel, and she would circle it for several minutes as though assessing structural integrity before stepping in, at which point she immediately tried to climb out. Drying her was its own event. She would tolerate the towel for exactly 30 seconds and then tear it out of my hands and drag it to her corner as a prize. She was chaos in a fur coat, and she was absolutely certain she was the most important thing in any room she walked into. She was usually right, and then there was dust. He communicated entirely through position and stillness and the particular quality of his attention, which was total. He found high ground immediately, the top of the refrigerator by week 2, then my shoulder, then the highest cabinet in the kitchen, and he watched everything from up there with those huge pale eyes. He was always the first one through any door when something was wrong. I never once figured out how he knew. He always knew. He had this habit, when he was settled somewhere safe, of tucking all 4 feet underneath himself and becoming perfectly round and still, like a stone. Like something that had decided to simply be in a place rather than merely occupy it. I used to watch him from across the room and feel something quiet inside me that I couldn't name. I needed quiet things that year. I needed them badly. At the time, they were just 3 animals who needed warmth and food, and someone willing to stay. I had no idea we were already learning each other in the exact ways we would one day need. The first treatment was in April, the second in May. Between them I lost weight I didn't have to lose and developed a shake in my hands I couldn't fully control. And I was careful every single day to be calm inside the house. Because G was watching. Because Rue, for all her chaos, would go very still when I was sick in the mornings and press herself against my legs while I knelt over the toilet and stay there without moving, which was the most profound stillness I ever saw from her. Because Dust would appear on the bathroom counter, I never heard him jump up, and simply sit there until I turned the light off. I thought I was only trying to survive the treatments. I didn't realize they were learning how to take care of me too. Quietly, in the ways that mattered, in the ways no one else was there to notice. I drove myself to every appointment. I drove myself home. I graded papers on a tablet from the treatment chair because it gave my hands something to do and my mind somewhere to be. On the bad days, the days when the nausea came in waves and my legs went unreliable, I would get inside the front door and sit on the floor in the hallway and just wait to feel like a person again. Rue would come and lie across my feet without being asked. G would come and sit beside me, close but not touching, always leaving the first move to me. And Dust would settle himself 2 feet away facing the door, a compact stillness between me and whatever waited in the dark. I don't know how to explain to you what it meant to not be alone in those hallways. I was carrying it quietly because that felt like the only way to keep carrying it, and in that hallway, on the floor, I was not alone. 3 animals sat with me, who did not need me to explain anything, who asked nothing, who simply showed up. It helped more than I can say. On the quieter evenings, when the nausea had eased, all 3 of them would settle near me while I lay on the couch under a blanket. Rue tucked against my stomach. G on the floor beside me, one hand resting near my shoulder. Dust on the back of the couch above my head, 4 feet folded under him, watching the room. Some nights I took my medication with one hand and kept the other resting on Rue's back, just to feel something warm. They didn't ask what the pills were for. They just stayed. Month 6. G could reach the kitchen counter if he stretched, which he did constantly, not to take anything but just to rest his chin on the edge and look at whatever was there. He had started to make a low sound in the evenings, not quite a hum, not quite a moan, something in between, that I eventually understood was contentment. It took me 3 months to recognize it because it was so quiet. He wasn't the kind of creature who announced happiness. He just had it, and sometimes it made a sound. Rue had discovered the backyard. She would sprint the full perimeter at top speed for no reason, change direction sharply, sprint back, dig 3 inches into the ground, fill it in, dig it again somewhere else, find a leaf, and carry it with great ceremony across the yard, abandon the leaf, sprint the perimeter again. She was a tornado with a tail. G would sit on the back steps and watch her with the expression of someone observing a natural disaster from a safe distance. Not alarmed, simply taking it in. Dust watched from the fence post, perfectly balanced, those pale eyes moving over the yard and the tree line and the sky. Rue would career past him at top speed, and he would not flinch. G would rumble quietly on the steps, and the 3 of them would settle into their positions the way they always did, as if the yard and the house and everything in it had always been exactly theirs. They had started that month to sleep together. I don't know when it happened exactly. I know that I came downstairs one morning in February and found all 3 of them on the living room rug. G on his back, one arm out to the side, Rue curled in the crook of that arm with her nose tucked under her own tail, and Dust draped across G's chest like a throw blanket, all 4 feet tucked under, eyes half open. G's hand rested on Rue's back with the weight of something permanent. I stood in the doorway for a long time. I took no photograph. I wasn't ready to. Some things need to be held before they can be kept. The 3rd treatment was a Tuesday in June. I got home at 11 at night. I made it to the hallway. I made it to the bathroom. That night, the night I thought I had nothing left in me, was the night I finally understood why I had stopped for that box. I sat down on the tile floor, and the door swung shut behind me, and I had nothing left. Not nothing in the way of sadness. Nothing in the most literal sense. I had used everything I had. Every scrap of functional courage I had been rationing for months. The tank was empty. The floor was cold. The light above the sink was too bright. I sat with my back against the cabinet and my legs out in front of me, and I thought, I cannot get up. I genuinely cannot do it right now. It was past 2 in the morning when I heard the handle. That particular sound, the mechanism turning, slowly, with the deliberate care of someone making certain of each movement before the next. I knew it the way I knew G's evening hum. He turned the handle the way he did everything, taking his time. The door swung open. He looked at me on the floor. That look, patient, considering. Something moving behind the stillness. Something I had been watching for 3 years without ever fully translating. He walked in. He turned around. And he sat down behind me, not beside me, behind me, so that my back rested against his chest and my head fell just below his chin. Exactly the position I had held him in 3 years ago when he was small enough to carry, when I read out loud with him pressed to me, because the warmth and the sound together were what he needed to sleep. 190 pounds now, 3 years later. He sat down on a bathroom floor at 2 in the morning, and my back fit against him the same way it always had. He made no sound. Rue came in 30 seconds later. She didn't yip. She didn't bark. She walked in, looked at me, and lay across my feet, her chin on the tile, her red tail across my ankles like something meant to anchor me. Dust was already in the doorway, facing out, eyes moving slowly over the dark hallway, left to right, every muscle in his compact body still and ready, a guardian taking his post. I had not called them. The door had been closed. I put my hand over G's arm. His fur was warm and dense beneath my fingers. He didn't move. Rue's warmth spread up from my feet. Dust held his doorway without blinking. I stayed on that floor until the light came gray through the window above the sink. None of them moved before I did. I need to tell you about the night I found out my scan was clean. 14 months of treatment. 14 months of drives and chairs and shaking hands and quiet hallways and floors. The call came on a Thursday in October. I have learned over many scans not to answer too fast. If I pick up on the first ring, my hands shake too badly to hold the phone. I let it ring twice. I was standing at the kitchen counter, hands flat on the cold surface, rain coming down outside, ordinary October rain, just gray. And I picked up on the second ring. Clean. The treatment had worked. I said thank you. I hung up, and I slid down the cabinet to the kitchen floor. Not by choice. Not slowly. The way I had been going down to floors for over a year, whenever something was too large to hold standing up. I sat with my legs out in front of me, and I started crying. The kind I had not let myself cry in over a year. The kind with no shape and no end. G came in from the back room. He looked at me on the floor, that flat, patient, considering look I had spent 3 years learning. He sat down beside me, and then, for the first time, in 3 years, in thousands of mornings and midnight feedings and bathroom floors, in all of it, he reached over and placed his hand flat on top of my head, not gripping, not moving. Just there, heavy and warm and completely still. Rue pressed herself against my left side, her small body radiating heat into my ribs. Dust stepped onto my lap and tucked his feet beneath himself with a finality that said, I am staying here. I have decided. I put my hand over G's and I cried until I was empty, and then I sat there in the quiet. I want to tell you about the day my ex-husband came back. It was a Saturday morning in November, 14 months after I'd gotten that phone call, 8 months after my final clean scan. The kind of morning with thin, cold sun and leaves still wet from rain. G was in the backyard. Rue was doing her perimeter sprint. Dust was on the fence post. I heard the car before I saw it. A rental. He had always hated rentals. He parked at the curb and sat in it for a moment before getting out, which was new. The man I married never hesitated. He'd aged in 2 years. Not badly. But the easy confidence in his walk had changed into something more careful, more studied. And I understood before he reached the gate that the woman at the gym had found someone newer. That the thing he had traded his life for had turned out not to hold. He said my name. He said he had made a mistake. He said he had been thinking about everything for a long time. He said he knew the timing wasn't ideal, but he hoped we could talk. I stood on the porch, and G came around the side of the house. He didn't run. He moved at his full, unhurried, ground-covering pace and came to a stop between me and the gate. Not charging, not threatening. Simply there, standing with his full weight settled. 4 feet 11 inches of calm and absolute certainty. His eyes on the man at the gate. My ex-husband went very still. G looked at him the way he looked at everything new, patiently, considering, building his map. And what he was mapping, I think, was the shape of what this man had left behind. The bathroom floors, the television voice in the dark, the hands I never let shake in front of my students. Rue appeared from the side yard. She stopped beside G's left leg and sat. No chaos, no yipping. She looked at the man at the gate with her bright dark eyes and said nothing. Rue, who had opinions about everything, had nothing to say to him. Dust dropped silently from the fence post. He landed without sound and walked forward until he was in front of G, closest to the gate, and sat down in the grass. Those pale eyes, that absolute stillness, the look of something that has decided where the boundary is and has no particular interest in discussing it. My ex-husband stood at the gate for a long moment. "They're not going to let me in, are they?" he said. It wasn't really a question. "No," I said. "They're not." He stood there a moment longer. I watched him understand something. I'm not sure what exactly, but I saw it happen, the understanding crossing his face like weather. He nodded. He got back in the rental car. He drove away. G didn't move until the car was out of sight. Then he turned, looked at me on the porch, and walked past me into the house. Rue followed. Dust was last, stepping across the threshold with dignity, and I closed the door behind all of us. There's a photograph on my kitchen counter. G, sitting against the living room wall, the afternoon sun coming in at an angle across the floor. Rue asleep against his leg, her white tipped tail draped across his knee. Dust on G's other knee, 4 feet tucked beneath him, decided and still. G's expression the same as it always is. Patient, considering, watching something only he can see. 3 animals who came to me in a collapsing box on the worst morning of my life. One to hold the world still when I couldn't. One to remind me that being alive means moving through it. One to watch the dark so I didn't have to. People ask me sometimes what saved me, and I think about the treatments, the drives, the careful doctors, the scans. I think about all of that, but I also think about bathroom floors and fence posts and small, warm bodies pressed against my feet on the nights I could not get up. I stopped on a road I did not need to be on, moving slowly because I was afraid of a woman at a desk by a window. I stopped for a box I almost passed. I had no idea I was stopping for the thing that would carry me through the worst of it. I was sick before I found them. I was lonely in a way that had no bottom. And they gave me something to wake up for when I had run out of reasons on my own. They needed me, and so I survived. That's the thing about being needed. It doesn't ask you whether you're ready. It just holds on. She rescued a gorilla, a fox, and a Pallas cat. Years later, all 3 saved her life. Not just once, every single day.